5 minutes of questions. Ms. Marr, your public statements and social media posts reflect left-wing ideology and blatant opposition to free speech. After all, you were the head of Wikipedia for many years, which is a platform that doesn't tell the truth. Let's walk through some of your statements so the public can understand your personal views. You said your fellow Americans just elected Donald Trump as president again this past November. You called him a deranged racist and sociopath. You posted on X that America is addicted to white supremacy. It's appalling. You've publicly chastised using the phrase boy and girl, which you said erases the language for non-binary people. There's only two genders, by the way. Ms. Marr, the federal funding that your outlet receives comes from all American taxpayer dollars, not just from your viewers who support such statements as these. Let me inform you, and that your federal funding is also paid for by the other half of the country, the 77 million Americans who voted for President Trump, someone you called a deranged, racist sociopath.
All right. So you've just seen a snippet from today's hearing. And before we roll the full exchange, I want to be very clear about why this moment matters. What Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing here is not grandstanding, and it's not about personal politics. This is about accountability, taxpayer funding, and the credibility of publicly subsidized media institutions. Whether you agree with her tone or not, the substance of her questions hits directly at issues that affect every American who pays taxes and expects neutrality, transparency, and adherence to the law. This hearing exposes a fundamental contradiction. Media executives who publicly express strong ideological views while presiding over organizations that receive federal funding and claim to operate in the public interest. That tension deserves scrutiny, and it deserves direct questions, not evasive answers, not rehearsed talking points. So as you watch the full video, pay attention not just to what Representative Greene asks, but how often those questions are not answered directly. If you value serious oversight, constitutional clarity, and honest public debate, you're in the right place. Before we continue, make sure you like the video, subscribe to America's Civic Lens, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our deep dive into power, policy, and the truth. Now let's watch the full exchange, and we'll break it down afterward.
5 minutes of questions. Ms. Marr, your public statements and social media posts reflect left-wing ideology and blatant opposition to free speech. After all, you were the head of Wikipedia for many years, which is a platform that doesn't tell the truth. Let's walk through some of your statements so the public can understand your personal views. You said your fellow Americans just elected Donald Trump as president again this past November. You called him a deranged racist and sociopath. You posted on X that America is addicted to white supremacy. It's appalling. You've publicly chastised using the phrase boy and girl, which you said erases the language for non-binary people. There's only two genders, by the way. Ms. Marr, the federal funding that your outlet receives comes from all American taxpayer dollars, not just from your viewers who support such statements as these. Let me inform you, and that your federal funding is also paid for by the other half of the country, the 77 million Americans who voted for President Trump, someone you called a deranged, racist sociopath. Ms. Marr, many find your pro-censorship and anti-free speech views more concerning than your politics. The only speech you like seems to be speech that you agree with. In 2021, you called the First Amendment the #1 challenge in American journalism because it makes it hard to crack down on bad information. You said in a TED Talk that Our reverence for the truth might be a distraction. You've also expressed support for deplatforming individuals you view as fascist. Who do you think should be charged with cracking down on so-called bad information? Is it NPR? Is it the government? Is it you, Ms. Marr?
Congresswoman, Madam Chair, thank you so much for the opportunity to address this. I know.
Do you is it up to you and NPR to crack down on bad information or decide the truth? Answer the question, yes or no, Ms. Marr.
Absolutely not. I'm a very strong believer in free speech, and I believe that more speech.
Your public statements say otherwise. Ms. Marr, in 2021, when speaking at an Atlantic Council event, you said that when you were CEO of Wikipedia, you took a very active approach to disinformation and misinformation. During the COVID pandemic and the 2020 election, you said you censored information through conversations with government. Which governments were those, Ms. Marr? The Biden administration, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Wikipedia never censored any information.
These are your public statements, Ms. Marr. Ms. Marr, are you familiar with Section 399B of the Communications Act? It prohibits non-commercial education broadcast stations, NCEs, from airing commercials on behalf of for-profit entities. The FCC recently opened an investigation into the underwriting announcements and related policies of NPR and PBS. Does NPR air commercials for for-profit entities, Ms. Marr? Yes or no?
Madam Chair, we are in full compliance with the FCC's inquiry and will continue to cooperate.
I remind you, you're under oath, and violations of the Communications Act comes with a fine up to $10,000 and possibly up to a year in prison. Does PBS air for-profit commercials, Ms. Kruger?
We air underwriting announcements, and we believe we are in full compliance with the FCC, and we look forward to delivering the material required in this part of this investigation.
We look forward to that, too. I'm assuming you're concerned, both of you are concerned about this, and that's why you brought so many attorneys with you today. Ms. Kruger, using taxpayer subsidies, PBS funded Independent Lens to make documentaries for part of your programming. In 2016, Real Boy was aired about a trans teen navigating adolescent sobriety and the ramification of his gender identity. In 2022, the same series aired Our League, in which a trans woman comes to her old school Ohio bowling league in a story about transition. Then in 2024, A Racist Trees was aired, telling a story of how in Palm Springs, a black neighborhood fights to remove a divisive wall of trees. Do you think PBS needs to fund ridiculous material such as this that the taxpayers are having to pay for?
These are documentary films that are point-of-view pieces that are part of our primetime schedule for adults.
And parents and adults don't trust that type of programming.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I ask a unanimous.
Now that you've seen the entire hearing, let's talk plainly about what just happened. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene did exactly what members of Congress are elected to do, ask hard questions on behalf of the American taxpayer. This wasn't about silencing anyone. In fact, it was the opposite. It was about exposing who believes they should control speech, information, and narratives while being funded by the public. Let's start with the issue of public statements. When the head of a taxpayer-funded media organization publicly calls a sitting or former president a deranged racist sociopath, claims the country is addicted to white supremacy, and dismisses commonly used language like boy and girl, that's not neutral journalism. That is ideological advocacy. And Representative Greene was absolutely right to point out that federal funding does not belong to one political worldview. 77 million Americans voted for Donald Trump. Their tax dollars fund these institutions too. The question is not whether executives are allowed personal opinions. It's whether those opinions influence editorial direction, programming decisions, and enforcement of speech standards. That is a legitimate oversight concern. The most telling moment of this hearing came when Representative Greene pressed on free speech. Ms. Mayer's past statements, questioning the First Amendment, suggesting reverence for truth might be a distraction, and supporting deplatforming, stand in stark contrast to her claim in the hearing that she is a strong believer in free speech. Representative Greene didn't let that contradiction slide. She asked the most important question of the entire exchange: who decides what is bad information? Is it NPR? Is it PBS? Is it government officials? Or is it media executives who believe certain viewpoints should be suppressed? The reluctance to give direct yes or no answers spoke volumes. Then there's the issue of coordination with government during COVID and the 2020 election. Representative Greene raised concerns that discussions with government actors crossed into censorship territory. Whether one agrees with that characterization or not, the American public has a right to know where the line is between cooperation and control. The First Amendment exists precisely to prevent that line from being blurred. Equally important was Representative Greene's focus on legal compliance, particularly Section 399B of the Communications Act. This is not a culture war issue. It is black-letter law. Non-commercial educational broadcasters are prohibited from airing commercials for for-profit entities. When evasive answers replace straightforward compliance confirmations, Congress has an obligation to press further. Reminding witnesses that they are under oath is not intimidation. It is standard procedure. Finally, Representative Greene addressed content funding decisions, including PBS-supported documentaries centered on gender identity and racial narratives. Her question was not whether these stories can exist. It was whether taxpayers should be compelled to fund them, especially when many Americans do not view such programming as neutral, educational, or reflective of shared civic values. That distinction matters. At no point did Representative Greene argue that these viewpoints should be banned. She argued that public money should not be used to advance narrow ideological narratives under the banner of public broadcasting. That is a defensible, constitutionally grounded position. What this hearing ultimately revealed is not extremism, but imbalance. It revealed institutions accustomed to operating without meaningful scrutiny, and a lawmaker willing to challenge that comfort. You don't have to agree with Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene on every issue to recognize that oversight is not oppression, questions are not censorship, and taxpayer accountability is not radical. This is exactly why hearings like this matter, and exactly why America's Civic Lens exists, to analyze power, policy, and the truth without apology. If you found this breakdown valuable, share it, subscribe, and stay engaged. The conversation doesn't end here.